Hey guys, I'm Comire, and this is looking a little bit low res, don't you think? Now hey, you might be alright looking at a screen full of pixels. I mean, think about the Game Boy. That thing had millions of kids playing it, and that had so many tiny squares on the screen it looked like a dude off Minecraft jizzed all over the display. But some people have a certain minimum threshold for graphics. Anything less makes them feel more sick than anyone that thought, I'ma Google that after I just said Minecraft jizz. Well, this is Start and Select, and seriously, what is the deal with video game remasters? So a new game comes out, you know, like Justice Purge or something cool sounding like that. And graphically, this is the best that video games have ever looked. We've all thought about it about one game at one point in time. But go back to it 5, 10, 20 years later, and those graphics would have aged worse than your grandmum's fun nickname for black people. Well, that's where remasters come in. You see, modern day audiences aren't instinctively drawn to a game that looks visibly worse than what they're used to. And some games, though great at the time, looks like a baby drew James Bond's face on a scarecrow made of loose IKEA furniture. Nowadays, high quality visuals are so commonplace, the main bad guy of a Call of Duty game was Jon Snow. And no one cared. Don't old games deserve that loving indifference too? I've debated about remasters before, funnily enough, when another Zelda game was getting an upgrade. So, if you haven't watched it, give it a look. I'll be picking up where I left off. Although, wait, that doesn't say remasters. I mean, what, my beanie hat must have been on too tight. Who calls them HD remakes? Over time, a lot of different terms have arisen describing very similar things. Remasters, remakes, reboots, ports, HD collections. I heard Resident Evil 2 described as a reimagining and Shadow of the Colossus as an artistic remix. Like the amazing sound re had reminded certain reporters that when repeated it could repress their very difficult to remove gag flex. The precise wording matters about as much as a Diet Coke next to a KFC bucket, but the distinction is this. If the new game has dramatically different graphics than the original, it's a remaster. If the new game has dramatically different graphics and gameplay, it's a remake. And if it has neither of those things, well, they've just put the same game on a different console and hope you'll buy it if they put Definitive Edition on the box. That last one they'll sometimes call a port. It's like when the first Harry Potter book came out in 1997, and then came out in more stores in 2001 when the film came out. And then again as an ebook, and then again as an audiobook, and so on and so forth. Except we don't say Harry Potter was ported to Kindle and Audible and that little hipster bookshop on Watson Avenue. We're living in a more digital-only age, with technology mainly existing in the cloud. Lifting old games from the constraints of physical media helps preserve them, so they can still be played after all the PS1 discs get scratched, and the last N64 cartridge gets blown so hard it turns over and leaves the money on the bedside table. Re-releasing an older series to modern players brings it back into the public consciousness. It can remind people of characters and storylines. Online multiplayer can breathe new life into forgotten games, like Dark Souls Remastered or Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. And different platforms allow different audiences to play them, like how I never played Link's Awakening on the Game Boy, or how 20 million people never played anything on the Wii U. Remasters aren't just an opportunity for consumers, but for developers too. They get the chance to learn new console hardware, figure out the kinks, and test public appetite before fully developing a new entry in the series. Like 343 Industries, making Halo the Master Chief Collection on Xbox One. All the bugs and the terrible online matchmaking that game had, well, it was just the unwanted handy they had to give the bouncer in order to allow them to get with Zac Efron. Remasters are such big business. There are whole studios skilled at reverse engineering old code. Studios like THQ Nordic, like Grezzo, QLOC, Bluepoint, and Panic Button. Who knows? Maybe if they ported Duke Nukem 3D first, we wouldn't have got the Duke Nukem Forever that we did. But a remaster doesn't just mean stretching Little Link to widescreen and adding a couple colours here or there. Remastering involves tracking down old game files, creating new artwork, configuring frame rates, rewriting algorithms, fixing animations and physics breaks, time, money, and effort that frankly, not all games deserve. There isn't a publisher in the world who'd give a marketing budget to The Simpsons Wrestling Remastered. Every game ever made was a labour of love by some dev team at some point. And every game ever made could be enjoyed by someone 10 or 20 years later. But every game ever made can't be remastered. There's just too many. That'd be like going on 7 holidays with your first kid and then having to recreate all those holidays when the second kid comes along. And with each new console generation, new games keep on coming out, which needs to be available on future consoles. So you're redoing those 7 holidays plus 3 more when the third kid comes along. And I'm sorry, baby Annabelle, but Daddy can't afford Disneyland tickets a third time. Relying on remasters to bring old games to modern audiences is like finding Grandpa a new home every time he suspects the nurses are communists. Well-intentioned, but unsustainable. But playing old games directly on newer consoles can fill the gap. Enter backwards compatibility. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess was released on Nintendo Wii in 2006. Nintendo's follow-up console, the Wii U in 2012, was backwards compatible with Wii games. So, anyone buying a Wii U was able to play Twilight Princess, foregoing the wait for a remaster that came 10 years after the original, and doubling the number of people in the title that aren't the guy in the green hat. Backwards compatibility means any video game that you buy still has value after the console it came out on is dead and buried. If your copy of Deadpool the video game on Xbox 360 can still be played on today's console, well, you or a retailer could resell it for more than it's worth right now, or just play it forever if you want to. I mean, that's where video games are going anyway, right? Games as a service like Fortnite and Overwatch and Rainbow Six Siege, at the heart of it, are just made to get players to play that one game forever. And they're only replicating what big MMORPGs and MOBAs like League of Legends and World of Warcraft and StarCraft did 10, 15, 20 years ago. So, why should Burnout 3 not get the chance to destroy more social lives than FIFA, GTA Online, and Pornhub? Backwards compatibility can be done mainly through 2 methods. The first is legacy hardware, which is building a new console containing the necessary parts of a former console, like a set of Russian dolls that can play the Prince of Persia. The PlayStation 3 released able to play PlayStation 2 games, but the additional parts contributed to a higher than expected price point. So, once the PS3 library had a sufficient number of games, they removed the backwards compatible hardware. So, if you had a PS3 and wanted to see how Kratos managed to somehow get down and dirty and squeaky clean in God of War 2, you'd be fresh out of luck. Nintendo frequently used legacy hardware, as seen in the Wii, Wii U, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, and Nintendo 3DS. It's a shame that the Nintendo Switch broke tradition without so much as an add-on disc drive sold separately for Wii U. But I understand that, realistically, backwards compatibility only makes sense if the previous console was, you know, successful. If your last console was a catastrophic dumpster fire, well, simply re-release all the best games and pretend like that 5-year period never happened. That's the strategy with a Nintendo scene of quality. I mean, sure, keeping all your old consoles around to play old games is an option, provided they never break down and you've got a TV unit with more openings than the vacancies board at the Weinstein Company. But that's not how technology works. Machines are multi-purpose now. Your PS2 could play movies. Your car could play movies. You can reach into your pocket right now, pull out a glass rectangle and tap it like 10 times and watch any movie. Backwards compatibility also happens through emulation. That's done by programming processes and conditions similar to a former console so the game believes it's being used by the original machine. Microsoft opted for this, enabling the Xbox One to play some original Xbox and Xbox 360 games, conveniently assembling all their dumb console names under one totally not confusing roof. It's also a method nearly synonymous with pirating video games. And while the YouTube police will want me to remind everyone that is illegal, it is also the most reliable form of game preservation and archiving that the games industry won't do for themselves. If they won't give you a legal route to buy Hulk Ultimate Destruction on GameCube, I'd certainly understand if you took matters into your own big green hands. I mean, ultimately, all I'm asking for is any game made to be available and playable. That anyone can have the opportunity to enjoy a piece of work regardless if they were born 10 years after the game came out. Be it through constant remasters, backwards compatibility, heck, I'd even take a digital store that worked with every game ever, that worked with every future console ever, till the end of time, forever. Google put Assassin's Creed on a web browser, and some guy put Snake on a building. I think they can work this one out. I stumbled across this quote in a Nintendo Life forum. Def Hallen wrote, "Just imagine if Halo or Super Mario Bros. Couldn't be played in 20 years. There's only a certain number of cartridges of Mario out in the world. Once they stop working, should we be okay with the game being gone forever?" They're right. If fine art can survive hundreds of years later, and sex tapes can live eternally on RedTube, why should a video game just disappear? And before I wrap up, may I introduce you to a couple of artists who have done some remastering of their own in this Comire Corner, George Malm and Raf Grazzetti. Both these artists have artistically remixed many characters from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, as well as a few others here or there that you may recognise. George brings it with bright colours and personality-filled facial expressions, while Raf goes hard on realistic interpretations with atmospheric 3D rendering. Check out both of their work in the description below. But now, here's the question. What's the best way to guarantee we can play great old games? Maybe remasters, maybe backwards compatibility, maybe an online store like Steam, or maybe something else entirely that you might have thought of. Let me know down below or chuck me a tweet. The right idea is definitely out there, we just need to think of it. And with that, I've been Comire, this has been Style and Select, thank you, and good night. Video games. The year after Pac-Man came out, a studio called Mystique, who later became PlayAround, made Bachelor Party, a clone of Breakout that's so lazy it's literally laying horizontal. And Beat 'em and Eat 'em, which takes the phrase catching an STI so verbatim you could probably contract gonorrhea through the controller alone.